Well, howdy, y'all. How y'all doing today? That was kind of weird. I had an alarm on, and then it came up with this meme afterwards. Hold on. I don't know. I can't even see the whole thing. But yeah, apparently a meme came on after after the alarm finished. How are y'all doing today? Let's see what we got with us. Let's see. We got Aussie Cat and Bold. How you doing, bud? It's been a long time. I'm just here because I'm giving updates today, talking about what ended up happening in Nova Scotia. It's been almost a month, actually, since then. So for people, just quick catch up, on April 18th and 19th, there was a mass shooting in Nova Scotia, the worst one in Canadian history, that saw the deaths of, it was either 22 or, I think 23 people, including the gunman. And since then, if you've been watching what Seamus has been doing on his channel, we've been covering this because a friend of ours had her family ended up getting killed in this shooting. And anyway, when we were covering this, we found that the RCMP were not being legitimate in what they were in the updates that they were ending up giving. We were starting to figure out things such as the timeline didn't add up. And then it seemed like the RCMP let this guy get away because he was in an RCMP uniform, in an RCMP vehicle. And from what we can tell, it's like this guy did not just get out of the area of Portapique on his own, but he actually passed through RCMP barricades. 13 hours they let this go on with no update to the public. Now, the one thing that the RCMP has been saying is that this guy, Gabriel Wortman, who went on this rampage, was not known to the police, right? No, we had no idea who this guy was. There's nothing we could have done to stop him before this. And it's not like people have come out and said anything. It's not like people spoke out to the RCMP and the police in the past to try and explain how much of a danger this guy was. Except they have now. A neighbor reported Nova Scotia mass shooter, domestic violence, weapons to police. Even though I'm in the military and I know how to use a weapon, the man scared the crap out of me, the woman said. A former neighbor of the gunman behind last month's mass shooting in Nova Scotia said she reported his domestic violence and cache of firearms to the RCMP years ago and ended up leaving the community due to herself due to fears of his violence. So this already throws into the crapper any sort of defense that the RCMP doing that they was unknown to him, that they were unknown to police. Because at the same time, we know that Gabriel Wortman back in 2001 beat the crap out of a 15-year-old kid. We knew he was involved with loan sharking, which is probably some relation to what ended up happening with that 15-year-old kid. We knew that he had threatened to kill his own father, and in fact, before he ended up getting killed at Enfield, seemed to be going his way to Halifax, where his father lived. Very likely that that's where he was going in order to kill his father, most likely. But then at the Enfield gas station, where Wortman was filling up this vehicle, the tactical units, the police tactical units, just happened to stop for gas themselves, come across this man, and shoot him dead right then and there. But hey, how could they know? Because he was unknown to them, right? Unknown? Even though he had been reported in all this, even though it was well aware of his history of violence, even though people reported to him, that this goes back to, as I say, Brenda Forbes said in the summer of 2013, this is almost 7 years ago this guy has been reported on. And let's not even mention the fact that the police were well aware that he had police vehicles, mock vehicles, in his property. They came to him and told him that he can't have it on the road. You have to put this vehicle up on a trailer because, it's illegal for you. Let's just see again. This police car, this mock-up police car, because we know that the RCMP uniforms were legitimate. So we know that the RCMP vehicles were legitimate. The RCMP uniforms were legitimate, and this is the vehicle that they have, claiming it's a mock-up. Now, it's just my opinion, but I'm going to say that this is not a mock vehicle, even though they're still going on this, and we're going to see in an update that ended up getting released just a couple days ago. But this is about as legitimate as you can get. It's got all the trimmings that you would need to make it look legitimate. It's got the lights on the top. It's got the RCMP logo and the decal that's over there. It's got the horse and rider. It's got the 911. The only thing that was missing was the license plate. But everything else was there. So, it was reported back in 2013 to the police about who this guy was and the amount of violence that he had, because a lot of this had to do with domestic violence. And as we just read, Brenda Forbes said in the summer 2013, she told police about reports that Gabriel Wortman had held down and beaten his common-law spouse behind one of the properties he owned in Portapique, a coastal community west of Truro. Forbes said her first awareness of Wortman's domestic violence was shortly after he moved to Portapique in the early 2000s, when his partner came to the door and asked for help. So we're going back. We're going back nearly 20 years when all this violence ended up starting. We're going back at least 7 years since it was reported to the police, probably more than that. My guess is this Brenda Forbes is not the only one that ended up actually reporting Wortman to the police. My guess is there were many others who did so as well. Typically, if you're someone that causes this much attention, especially for violence, there's going to be multiple reports that are filed. But once again, unknown to the police. Quote, she ran to my house and said Gabriel was beating on her and she had to get away. She was afraid, says a 62-year-old veteran from the Canadian Forces. And we have all here the victims of this shooting that ended up taking place. So, the RCMP can't pretend anymore that they didn't know about Gabriel Wortman. But that's not the only thing they lie about. I mean, I've been adamant about the timeline and what's going on with that. If you're saying anything in the chat, I don't see it right now. I'll check it out in a little bit. But the timeline was a big thing for me. When I started looking into this, I started mapping it out on Google Earth and Google Maps, and I could see that from the times they were giving us when he was in this area and saying from where he had to get to the Enfield gas station, it wasn't adding up. You took into account about the people he shot and killed. You took into account the fires that he had to set. You took into account about how he got into the shootout with the two Mounties at Shubenacadie, and how he had to get into the shootout with them. He had to set their cars on fire. He needed to steal Joey Weber's vehicle. He had to go to Gina Goulet's house, and then he had to kill her. He needed to change his clothes. He needed to steal his he needed to steal her vehicle. He had to go to Enfield, which was only a few minutes drive from Gina Goulet's house. It was not adding up. But then there was also things such as is it this one? Yeah, it is this one. Hold on. Then there was this here. There was this video footage that was taken at the cigar stop at 10:55 a.m. on the morning of the 19th, where Gabriel Wortman gets out, changes into a safety vest, and continues on his way. But then the RCMP came out and said, no, in fact, this was 10:25 when this video took place. Even if security cameras are off by a bit, a half an hour doesn't add up to me. We'll pull up the proof right now. Let's do it. So, where were the maps? I think it was here. Yeah, here it is. So this is the video footage they took at that cigar shop, which they also said was a fire hall, and that it's no freaking fire hall. But here we are, 10:25 a.m. in Millbrook, they're claiming. Even though we have the video footage right here that says 10:55. So none of it is adding up. They tell one lie and then progress on that lie. Back where I was. So, now, one thing too, before we get into the updates, I just want to quickly check out, is, this was here, this is some new photos that were released of the shooter's house, of Wortman's house. This is apparently going back to November. So, as I was saying, Seamus and I have a mutual friend, Tara. Tara lost her family in this. She lost her brother, her sister-in-law, and her young niece in this shooting. Now, one thing that Tara said is about how this guy was rich, about what she knew from her brother, who had a run-in with this guy. This guy was rich, and she said it was a Montana's that was in the place. But it's quite clear this guy has a bar in his place, as we're seeing right here. So it's all sort of adding up. And then there's more. And then we have this here, which is also all these bikes that he had, including the bike from what was that movie? He had a bike from that like 60s biker movie. Where was it? I think I still got it here. What was the name? Easy Rider. He had the bike from Easy Rider. Hold on. Here it is right here on the bottom. So that's Gabriel Wortman up top, but then that's the bike from Easy Rider that he apparently purchased and has in his home, along with his other collection of bikes and not just one RCMP vehicle anymore, apparently, but we're talking about it was one, then it was two, now suddenly we're up to four. He had 4 cop cars. Now, I've seen people that have had, decommissioned cop cars. You can buy them. But going back to the picture of the vehicle, They're older police cars. Like, what are the old police cars? Is it the Grand Am? I think they are. Not a, within a couple years, Ford Taurus RCMP vehicle with all the trimmings on it. Again, they're claiming that these are decals, which we'll see on the updates in a little bit. But I've never seen a police car that is this modern and this shiny and this nice with everything on it. I mean, they're trying to claim the decal was there, but what about these lights up here? We know that you can't have the lights. The best I've ever seen on an RCMP vehicle is like those old ones are, you know how they have the spotlight sitting out of the driver's side vehicle so they can shine it? I've seen they still have that, but the rest of it has been stripped down and painted over. You don't have access to such a modern RCMP car, a police car. And we move on. So they're showing now that this is another image of the police car that we can see. And if you're taking a look, it's got the 28B11, which is what they were saying on the, as police car had, as we can see in the picture here. So they're showing about how it was around months ago. And I don't think anyone's denying that he had it months ago. But what was he doing with this in the first place? How did he get access to an authentic RCMP vehicle? And just my opinion, my thoughts, nothing I can confirm, but it seems to me that is a very modern, a very real type of RCMP vehicle, not an authentic mock-up. Now, they ended up having an update on investigation into the incidents of April 18th and April 19th, released on May 11th, 2020. Now, the first two paragraphs are just covering about, we're looking into this, this is what we need, this is all the groups that we have together, and blah, 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 blah. It really starts down here in the yellow. Investigators have identified the supplier that used the RCMP decals that were on the gunman's car. The decals were created without permission of the business owner. The business owner and individual who made the decals are both cooperating with police. So once again, doubling down that this is exactly what happened. Now, I don't have any proof to say that this isn't what ended up happening, but the amount of, the law is being broken just in doing that and making these decals for it. I'm not sure, for instance, they say, it was made against the permission of the business owner, and they say the business owner and the individual who made the decals. I'm not sure who the business owner is in this situation, because the individual made the decal, and my guess is put it on and everything. So I'm not sure who the business owner is on this. But they're not giving any real information as to who these people are, because it's an ongoing investigation, is what they're going to claim. But they haven't given any updates about this situation. You remember there was, I think it's almost 2 years ago now, there was the shooting out in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Now, that was weird enough on some of the things that ended up happening. Like, they put a publication ban. They put a publication ban so you couldn't give updates on it, and that happened for like a week. But within a couple days, they were at least telling you what kind of firearms were being used in that shooting that killed two, I don't remember how many people died. I think it was 4. It was 2 police officers and 2 civilians that ended up getting killed in that situation, but they at least gave the update within a couple days about what type of gun was being used. And in that case, it was a legally owned firearm. In this case, it was not, because Wortman didn't have the credentials to get legally owned firearms, and they're going to go into this too. What advertisements? When the gunman left the Portapique area on April 18th, he was in possession of 2 semi-automatic handguns and 2 semi-automatic rifles. Now, this was a discrepancy they gave in a previous update that they did. I think it was the first one that they did. Yeah, okay, so it was in the very first update that they did, which I have here. They ended up... Here it is, okay. Second. So we have here, this is the first RCMP update, is they don't seem to be very they don't really seem to have their shit together to explain whether it's pistols, what type of guns, because as we see up here where I have the first highlight in gray, it says, we also learned that the gunman was in a possession of a pistol and long-barreled weapons. He was also known to own several vehicles that looked like police vehicles. And then down here, just a couple paragraphs down, what we have in sort of the yellow, our officers responded it was at that time, through a significant key witness, we confirmed more details about Gabriel Wortman. This included the fact that he was in possession of a fully marked and equipped replica vehicle and was wearing a police uniform. He was in possession of several firearms that include pistols and long guns. Seamus was actually the one to find this out and sort of point it out. So in their previous update, they were unclear. Was it a single pistol? Was it multiple pistols? Now they're saying that it is 2 pistols and 2 semi-automatic rifles. One of the guns has been traced to Canada. The remaining guns that were recovered are believed to have been obtained in the United States. Now, what's interesting about that, too, is that they're saying 1 came from Canada, the other 3 came from the United States. Is that it was said that Bill Blair, the Minister of Public Safety, I believe that's what he's the Minister of, he ended up coming out and saying how on this gun ban that they ended up putting through soon after the shooting, where they put like 1,500 different firearms on this list that you could no longer buy, he said 2 of the firearms that were on that ban were firearms that were used in this situation. So either way, it's not like the gunman went through the proper procedures in order to get this firearm. He clearly imported illegally. You can't just go into the US, buy guns, bring them back to Canada, and own the guns. Although, ironically, this is exactly what the RCMP does, because they don't get their firearms from Canada. It's not like we have a illustrious industry when it comes to creating firearms. No, they import them from the US, and they use them. So, a little bit of irony there, if you ask me. But this ban that Trudeau did, that Bill Blair was all for, that wouldn't have stopped Gabriel Wortman from getting his firearms. He would have gotten 3 from the US, including one of them that he used was, at least one of them came from the US, but my guess is he probably got both of these from the US, so that's something. The RCMP is working with the Canadian Border Service Agency on the investigation on any cross-border or border-related elements. The caliber of the weapons is not being released because determining where and how the gunman obtained the firearms is part of the central investigation, and we use this detailed information to verify the credibility of some of the information we received. Now remember, going back to what I just said a few minutes ago, we knew within a couple days of the shooting out in Fredericton what type of firearms that were used. In this situation, it's been almost a month, and they're not telling us anything more than 2 semi-automatic handguns and 2 semi-automatic rifles. Not the make, the model, the caliber, nothing. Now why would that be? Because the RCMP admitted he had a authentic RCMP uniform. He had a mock-up RCMP vehicle, as well as RCMP equipment. Now, what would that equipment be? Maybe a police scanner, maybe a laptop or something. But one thing has been clear in this whole situation. The RCMP have been covering up for this situation on and on and on. They have been clearly going out of their way to try and give as few details as possible. Could it be, just speculating, that it's possible that the RCMP somehow had given weapons to Wortman? This is some speculation only. Of course, I would never accuse the RCMP of doing anything like that. But if he had access to the uniform, if he had access to the vehicles and had access to RCMP equipment, then it's quite possible that he had access to RCMP weapons. And their weapons do go missing. I think I got something here for that. Let's see. Uh, bu- 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 There was a case. One second. There was a. Yeah, here it is. Oh, come on, load. Give it a second. Yes. RCMP 813 guns lost by and stolen from police and public agencies 2005 to 2019. So, we know that the RCMP lose a lot of guns and have lots of guns stolen from them. What are the chances that maybe Wortman was using a gun, whether it was an RCMP standard issue firearm, or maybe it was a gun that had already been confiscated by the RCMP, already supposed to be locked up in a evidence locker, but instead ended up actually in the hands of Wortman, and maybe that's why they're being so mum about everything. That's just my thoughts and a possibility. That's all I'm doing. Because, you know, one thing from the streams I've done with Seamus lately is that it seems quite clear that that those were being watched by the RCMP because they gained a lot of attention, but then on top of that, we would show a discrepancy, and suddenly they would come out the next day or two with an update about how that discrepancy no longer existed. We would show the timeline and be like, well, how did he get from point A to point B in such a short amount of time when he was supposed to do all this stuff? Like, how did he get from where the video I showed, where it showed the time at 10:55 at the cigar shop, how did he get from there all the way down to the gas station on Enfield, which was about a 40-minute drive? He had to get in a shootout with cops and everything in between. It was a 40-minute drive, and yet somehow he got there in about a half an hour to get killed, and then they come out and be like, oh no, actually it was 10:25 when this video was taken, even though we have the timestamp on the video itself, and even though the news tried to clip out that timestamp time and time again. But now they're saying that they will not give the caliber, will not give the firearm, because of an ongoing investigation. Bullshit. The RCMP Behavior Analysis Unit is conducting a psychological autopsy of the gunman with the intent of gathering insights into why he committed the acts of violence. This includes an analysis of his personality, past behavior, and how he relates to others. Now, the thing about this is you will never, ever be able to get access to this autopsy. They will give you some details about it, some few things that they want to give you, but you will never be able to actually get full documentation for this for one simple reason. They are refusing to give the autopsies of the victims to family members, which is illegal. Yet, again, my friend Tara, she's tried to get the autopsy from her brother, and I believe also her sister-in-law and her niece. Try to get those autopsy from the police. The RCMP aren't doing it. They're not giving her that autopsy. And this is going to be the same thing with here. And I don't know for a fact, but I think a lot of the other families of the victims are going through something similar. And just more about the psychological autopsy. Okay, so I got one more thing I want to go through before I sign off. This is not going to be a long stream. Oop, wow. Okay, was this here. So, we're going to go through. We're going to go through and take a quick look, just a couple minutes, at Seamus here. And what he came across in a video he put out, I think it was yesterday. Last night sometime. So this is quite interesting because, again, we're going on about the timeline and about the problems that are there. He found another problem with the timeline once again. Another one of these manipulated timestamps that the RCMP are trying to pass off in one of their updates. So we're just going to take a quick look at that.
But it gets worse. Here, of course, they say it's 4 minutes off, which is okay, fine. Here, this one is deeply disturbing to me, more so even than the cigar hut. So I actually put together a montage of this, but so I don't know if you can see on the screen, probably not. This is taken from right beside, on the opposite side of the highway of the big stop, the end point of Mr. Wortman's escapade, right? This is across the highway. This says 11:23. Let's bring up a better version of that so that you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. Now, they're saying to you that says 11:23. Is that correct? Did I read that right? 11:23. Well, it actually says 10:31. So I thought to myself, this is an official government weigh scale. This is something actually that they use, all truckers have to use, and it has to be very accurate. They're kind of anal about that. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe it's not an official weigh scale, you know? So I drove around. I drove around on Google Earth. And when I drove around on Google Earth and I went to the actual weigh scale, well, wouldn't you know, this is who runs the weigh scale. That would be the RCMP. Very, very strange that the RCMP, running a government weigh scale, has the time out by 52 minutes. What are the chances that two cameras have the wrong times? That there is an hour and 52 minutes plus half an hour is an hour and 22 minutes. An hour and 22 minutes suddenly has been lost. Discrepancy. Do you understand? And how could it possibly be that this gray Mazda, Miss Gina Goulet's gray Mazda, increase this up here, right? Gray Mazda, which was the red Mazda, but then became the Mazda, even though it was the gray Mazda always? How is it that it's driving down here at 10:31, according to this clock? Because he doesn't die for another hour. So what is going on?
Seamus has been doing a great job with this whole situation, the whole investigation into it, and I commend him for that. So, between everything that we've seen the police lie about the times, or have been extremely incompetent anyway, or if they're not lying, they're extremely incompetent in their investigation. We have seen as they have said they didn't know Gabriel Wortman when they did know Gabriel Wortman, clearly, because they were called to his house a few times. People had been reporting him since at least 2013, probably going back earlier, because again, if we go back to that original news article, that woman said, Forbes said she was her first awareness of Wortman's domestic violence was shortly after he moved to Portapic in the early 2000s, when his partner came to her door and asked for help. So we're at least going back that far, and there's just more on top, more and more and more and more and more that they have been lying about over and over and over again. They're either lying or they're keeping a lot secret without giving anyone a good reason why. They like to fall back on the excuse of it's an ongoing investigation. But that doesn't, a lot of the things that they're falling back on in saying this doesn't even add up. Like, they could actually release those details, but they don't. And then there's the news that have been clipping out statements that don't add up to what the RCMP wants to say. So a good example was Clinton Ellison. Clinton Ellison lost his brother in the shooting. And when he went out, after his brother went out to check out a fire to like try and help, and he never came back, Clinton went out, and that's when he came across the gunman, and he ran away and he hid in the woods for 4 hours. And he said he was there, and he criticized the RCMP. He was like, I was waiting for him to show up, but they never came. I was there for 4 hours before finally a police vehicle came in, and I was able to get out, and he was criticizing them. They clipped out that part where he's criticizing them and being like, where were you guys? And then his Facebook gets scrubbed. Then there was another one. There was another one that CBC was during a live stream and an update, where they were talking about the situation at Portapic. And they said that pretty much whoever it was, the Campbell, the guy, one of the RCMP giving the statement, he was talking about, like, Seamus came across this too in one of his streams. It was a clip during a more than an hour-long live stream where they clipped out a part where he's talking about how they had him cordoned in like they had him cordoned off in this area, Portapic, in like a 4-kilometer area, and which would suggest that if he didn't get out that way, they're trying to claim he went through a field, which is complete load of horse crap. But they would suggest, in fact, that they actually let him out through one of their blockades because he looked like an RCMP officer. He was in an RCMP vehicle, and he probably got waved through one of these checkpoints, one of these barricades. But while CPAC kept that in, the CBC clipped that out. We ended up together off air. We went back and we like posted the side-by-side videos of each other, like matched them up, and then you can see exactly where it is. Maybe I'll pull that up real quick. I'll pull that up real quick. Second. Second. And we can listen to it. Not the whole thing. We're just going to go right to the part where they ended up clipping it out. So you're going to hear what sounds like an echo because we got the two video footages lined up, and then eventually one's going to drop off because the CBC clipped it, and it's going to pick back up where the live stream matched up again. But this was the difference between CPAC and the CBC. So it was over here. Let me just get down to a good spot, and also make sure you guys can hear it.
That issue, and we're conducting a full review of that system, and we're in conversations with not only the province, but also.
I heard that the suspect may have left Portapic driving through the woods. Did I hear correctly? Is that how he was able to avoid law enforcement? Is it estimated that he left the Portapic area before police arrived?
Coming right up.
Well, I would say that based on the call detail records that we have through our operational communication center, it shows our first unit arriving on the scene at 10:26 in the evening. And since that time, we've obtained a statement from an area resident that believed at the time that they saw a vehicle moving through a field was at around 10:35. So there's approximately a 9-minute period of time. We're talking about a 4-kilometer area. As
there it is. This is what the CBC cut out, but CPAC still got it.
I mentioned last Friday. We're talking about a 4-kilometer area. As I mentioned last Friday, there were several victims and several structure fires at that time. But it's our belief, based on the distance that the gunman had traveled to the Debert area, as well as the timestamp of the video that we've obtained, that he definitely would have left that area at that time. that would be, you know, certainly our understanding of the sequence of timing and the events that unfolded.
I think I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, la question suivante, is from Greg.
Okay, so that was the part they ended up cutting out. Seamus came across that completely accidentally. He was just rewatching one of them on the air, and he happened to notice the cut. I mean, it was a pretty obvious cut. But yeah, he ended up catching that. So he's done a great job with this whole situation. We're going to try and stay on top of this, because I know that interest is waning with people, but it's one of those things that we need to not let go. Because this is not the first time that the RCMP have been caught lying, caught doing all sorts of shady activity. But in this case, it's personal for us, but everybody should be demanding answers. This was the worst mass shooting in Canadian history, and they are doing everything they can to cover it up. And it's more than a lawsuit. It's more than them just trying to cover up so people don't sue them for negligence. But if they had some involvement one way or another, if Wortman was being helped by the RCMP, if he obtained firearms that were from the RCMP, whatever it happens to be, then this is what they're really trying to cover up, because it's going to do a lot of damage in the long run to their organization. And this is why they're doing everything they can to give as little detail as possible, and they're praying for this to die down. But we can't let it die down. So I'm thinking that's where I'm going to leave it today. And I want to thank you all for joining me today, for coming in, listening, joining in the chat. Sorry I didn't really get around to the chat, but yeah, sorry. I really got to get going. I got somewhere I need to be. Thank you all, and don't stop asking questions. Don't stop the investigation, because this is exactly what the RCMP wants, and we can't give it to them. All right, have a great night, and take care.